The late afternoon light poured through the towering glass windows of the Dalton mansion, casting sharp shadows across the polished marble floor. A 14-year-old girl knelt in the center of the grand parlor. Her name was Lila. Her hands trembled as she clutched an old folded letter. Around her stood the family. Henry Dalton, 48 years old, billionaire CEO of Dalton Enterprises, stood with his arms crossed. His face was stone. His wife Evelyn watched from the sofa, her expression cold. Their son Lucas, 17, stood near the doorway, eyes averted. Lila's voice broke the silence. "You promised me 3 wishes, sir." Henry's jaw tightened. He remembered. 2 weeks ago. The screeching tires. The smell of gasoline. His son pinned beneath the wreckage of a car. And this girl, small and terrified, pulling Lucas free moments before the flames erupted. He had said the words then. In gratitude. In relief. "If you want anything, ask. I'll give it to you." Now here she was. Asking. Henry exhaled slowly. "I'm a man of my word. 3 wishes. Speak." Lila lifted her head. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "The first wish is that you don't fire my mother." The room fell silent. No one moved. Evelyn's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. Lucas flinched. Henry stood frozen. His lips parted, but no words came. This wasn't what he'd expected. Not gratitude. Not money. Not a future. Just mercy. And in that moment, something ancient and buried began to crack open inside him. Maria had worked for the Dalton family for 11 years. She was the kind of woman who moved through rooms like a whisper. Efficient. Invisible. Devoted. She and her daughter Lila lived in a small cottage behind the main estate. It was modest, with peeling paint and a leaky roof, but it was theirs. Every morning Maria woke before dawn to prepare breakfast for the family. Every night she returned home to Lila, exhausted but smiling. Lila had grown up in the shadow of wealth she would never touch. She attended school on a scholarship funded by Dalton Enterprises, a program Henry had created years ago in memory of someone he'd lost. She was quiet. Observant. The kind of girl who noticed everything but said very little. She and Lucas attended the same private academy, though they existed in different worlds. He was the heir to an empire. She was the maid's daughter. But Lucas struggled with algebra, and Lila had a gift for numbers. So quietly she began helping him. Tutoring sessions in the library, notes slipped into his locker. He never thanked her. But he stopped failing. Henry Dalton was a man carved from granite. 15 years ago, his first wife had died in a car accident. The grief had turned him cold. He remarried eventually to Evelyn, a woman as polished and distant as he was. They lived in the same house but occupied separate lives. He rarely spoke to the staff. He didn't know their names. He didn't need to. Then came the accident. Lucas had been driving too fast on a rain-slicked road. The car skidded, flipped. Lila had been walking home from the bus stop when she saw it happen. She didn't think. She just ran. The car was on its side, smoke pouring from the engine. Lucas was trapped inside, dazed and bleeding. Lila climbed through the shattered window, ignoring the glass cutting her arms, and pulled him free. Seconds later, the car exploded. Henry arrived at the hospital an hour later. His son was bruised but alive. And sitting in the waiting room, hands bandaged, face smudged with soot, was Lila. Henry stopped in front of her. For a long moment he just stared. Then he knelt down. "You saved my son." Lila nodded, too tired to speak. Henry's voice cracked. "If you want anything at all, you ask me. I'll give it to you." Lila looked up at him with those wide, knowing eyes. "3 wishes," she whispered. "Like in the stories." Henry almost smiled. "Yes, 3 wishes." He thought she was joking. A child's fantasy. He stood, patted her shoulder awkwardly, and walked away. But Lila remembered. A week later, Evelyn found Maria in the east wing of the mansion, a section reserved for family only. Maria had been looking for a lost earring one of the guests had dropped during a party. But Evelyn didn't care about explanations. "You violated the rules," Evelyn said coldly. "You're dismissed. Pack your things." Maria's face went pale. please, Mrs. Dalton. I've worked here for over a decade. I have nowhere else to go. That's not my concern. Lila heard the news from one of the other housekeepers. Her heart stopped. She ran through the hallways past the paintings and the crystal chandeliers until she found Henry in his study. He looked up, irritated. What is it? Lila's voice shook. You promised me 3 wishes. Henry frowned. Child, this isn't the time. You promised. He set down his pen, studied her, and slowly, the memory returned. Yes, he said quietly. I did. Lila stepped forward, trembling. My first wish is that you don't fire my mother. Henry's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Something old. Something he'd buried long ago. He stood. Wait here. Lila watched him leave, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know if he would keep his word. She didn't know if men like Henry Dalton even remembered what promises were. But she had spoken, and that at least was something. Outside rain began to fall. Soft at first, then harder. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the sky. The whispers started immediately. By evening, every member of the household staff knew what had happened. The maid's daughter had knelt before Henry Dalton and demanded he spare her mother's job. She had invoked a promise, a debt. Some thought it was brave, most thought it was foolish. She doesn't know her place, one of the older housekeepers muttered. You don't make demands of a man like Mr. Dalton. That girl thinks she's special because she saved the boy, another added. But gratitude has limits. In the main house, Evelyn's fury was barely contained. She stood in the parlor, arms crossed, her face flushed with anger. That child had the audacity to stand in front of you and dictate terms, she hissed at Henry. And you said nothing. Henry stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the rain. She saved Lucas. So we're indebted to her forever. She's the maid's daughter, Henry. She needs to understand her place. And what place is that? Evelyn's eyes flashed. Beneath us. Henry turned slowly. His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. I gave my word. Your word, Evelyn laughed bitterly. To a 14-year-old girl. This is absurd. Fire Maria. Send them both away. We'll find another housekeeper. No. The single word hung in the air like a blade. Evelyn stared at him, stunned. What did you say? I said no. For a moment she looked as though she might scream. Then she turned sharply and left the room, slamming the door behind her. Henry remained at the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. His mind was a battlefield. He believed in order, structure, boundaries. But he also believed in honor. And he had given his word. Still, something about Maria unsettled him. Had for years. He couldn't place it. A strange sense of familiarity. A gratitude he didn't understand. Upstairs, Lucas sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. He owed Lila his life. He knew that. But the shame of it burned in his chest. She was nobody. The daughter of a servant. And now everyone knew that he had needed saving. By her. He wanted to thank her. He wanted to hate her. He didn't know which feeling was stronger. In the cottage behind the estate, Maria held her daughter's face in her hands. Lila, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. What have you done? I couldn't let them send you away, Mama. We are staff, mi amor. We don't make demands. We don't ask for things. We survive by staying invisible. But he promised. Men like him don't keep promises to people like us. Lila pulled away, her eyes fierce. He will. I know he will. Maria looked at her daughter and felt a sharp ache in her chest. Lila had always been too brave, too hopeful. It would break her one day. The next morning, the tension in the house was suffocating. Evelyn moved through the rooms like a storm, snapping orders, dismissing staff for the smallest infractions. She was looking for a reason. Any reason. That afternoon, she found one. Maria had been late returning a set of linens to the guest wing. It was a minor delay, nothing more. But Evelyn seized it. "This is unacceptable," she said coldly, standing in the hallway with the head butler. "Prepare her termination papers." The butler hesitated. "Mrs. Dalton, perhaps we should speak with Mr. Dalton first. I don't need his permission to manage my own household." But she did, and she knew it. Later that day, Lucas overheard a conversation between two of the older staff members in the kitchen. He had come down for water and paused just outside the door. "I still remember Maria from years ago," one of them said quietly. "Back when she was a nurse at the hospital, before she came here. The same hospital where the first Mrs. Dalton died. The very same. I heard she was there that night. Some say she even tried to save her." Lucas's blood went cold. He stepped back, his mind racing. His mother had never mentioned this. His father had never said a word. Why he needed answers. But he didn't know who to ask. That evening, as the rain began to fall again, Evelyn finalized the termination letter. She signed it with a sharp, satisfied flourish and placed it on Henry's desk. When Lila learned what had happened, she didn't hesitate. She ran, through the garden, through the rain, her clothes soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She found Henry in the study standing over the letter, reading it in silence. She burst through the door, breathless. "You promised me," she gasped. Henry looked up. His expression was unreadable. Lila stepped forward, water dripping onto the Persian rug. "You said if I wanted anything you'd give it to me. You promised." Henry set the letter down slowly. He looked at her. Really looked at her. The desperation in her eyes. The way she held herself, trembling but unbroken. And then for the first time in 15 years, a memory surfaced. Sharp and clear. A hospital corridor. The smell of antiseptic. A young nurse, her scrubs stained with blood, kneeling beside him as he sobbed. She had held his hand. She had whispered, "I'm so sorry. I tried." He remembered her face. And now standing before him, soaked and shaking, was her daughter. Henry's voice was barely audible. "Maria." Lila blinked. "What?" He looked past her through the doorway as if seeing ghosts. "Your mother. She was there. Wasn't she the night my wife died?" Lila's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. Henry's hands trembled. He picked up the termination letter, stared at it for a long moment, and then slowly, deliberately tore it in half. "No one," he said quietly, "is firing your mother." That night, Henry couldn't sleep. He went to his private study and unlocked the cabinet he hadn't opened in years. Inside were files, photographs, relics of a life he'd tried to forget. He pulled out a folder marked with a date, April 14th. The night his first wife, Catherine, had died. His hands shook as he opened it. There were hospital records, police reports, and then tucked between the pages, a photograph. It was taken at a charity event years before the accident. Catherine stood beside him, radiant in a blue dress. And next to her, smiling shyly, was a young woman in hospital scrubs, a nurse who had volunteered that night. Maria. Henry's breath caught. He stared at the face in the photo. Younger, brighter, but unmistakably her. He flipped through the hospital records. There it was, listed among the emergency staff on duty that night. Maria Reyes, RN. He read further. His vision blurred. A note handwritten by the attending physician. Nurse Reyes remained with the survivor throughout the night. Exceptional care under traumatic circumstances. Henry lowered the paper slowly. His chest tightened. She had been there. She had saved him. Not just emotionally. Physically. He vaguely remembered now through the haze of shock and grief. The car had caught fire. Someone had pulled him out. Someone had stayed with him as he screamed for his wife. It had been Maria, and she had never said a word. The next morning, Henry sent for her. The butler delivered the message with a worried expression. "Mr. Dalton requests your presence in the library, immediately." Maria's face went pale. Lila gripped her mother's hand. "I'll come with you." "No, mi amor. This is something I must do alone." But Lila followed anyway, hiding just outside the door. Inside the library, Maria stood with her hands clasped in front of her, eyes downcast. Henry sat in a leather chair, the photograph on the table between them. He gestured to it. "Do you remember this?" Maria glanced at the photo. Her throat tightened. "Yes, sir." "You were there, the night my wife died." She nodded. Henry's voice cracked. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Maria looked up, and for the first time in 11 years, she met his eyes directly. "Because no one wants to be thanked for someone else's pain." The words hit him like a punch. Henry stood abruptly, turning away, his hand covering his mouth. "You saved my life that night," he said hoarsely. "The car was on fire. I would have died with her. But you pulled me out. I did what anyone would have done." "No." He turned back to her, tears streaming down his face. "You did what no one else could. And I have lived in this house for 11 years, seeing you every day, and I never thanked you." Maria's own tears began to fall. "I didn't need thanks, Mr. Dalton. I only needed to know you were safe." Outside the door, Lila pressed her hand to her mouth, tears pouring down her cheeks. Her mother, her quiet, invisible mother, had saved this man's life. Henry crossed the room and, to Maria's shock, took her hands in his. "I owe you everything, and I will never let anyone treat you with anything less than the respect you deserve." He looked toward the door, knowing somehow that Lila was there. "Come in, child." Lila stepped inside, her face wet with tears. "Mama, you saved him." Maria nodded, unable to speak. Henry released Maria's hands and turned to Lila. "Your first wish I will honor for the rest of my life. Your mother will never be dismissed from this house. But you said you had 3 wishes. Lila wiped her eyes and took a breath. Her voice was steady, even as her heart pounded. "My second wish is that you tell your wife and your son the truth. That my mother saved your life, so they stop treating her like she's nothing." Henry's face went white. He shook his head slowly. "If I do that, Evelyn will never forgive me. My marriage is built on a lie," Lila said quietly. "And lies always hurt more the longer you keep them." Henry looked at Maria, then back at Lila. He thought of his son, his wife, the fragile structure of his life. But he also thought of the girl who had risked everything to save Lucas. The woman who had saved him and asked for nothing in return. He closed his eyes and made his choice. "I'll tell them," he whispered. "I'll tell them everything." Lila nodded, tears streaming down her face. Maria reached for her daughter's hand, and together they stood in the golden light of the library, waiting for the storm that was about to come. Henry called everyone to the grand hall the following evening, the entire household staff, Evelyn, Lucas, and Maria and Lila standing uncertainly near the back. The room buzzed with confusion. Henry Dalton never gathered everyone like this. Something was wrong, or something was about to change. Henry stood at the center of the room beneath the crystal chandelier. His face was pale but resolute. He cleared his throat. 15 years ago. He began, his voice steady but strained. "I lost the person I loved most in this world. My first wife, Catherine, died in a car accident, and that night I wanted to die with her." The room went silent. Evelyn's expression hardened. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. Henry continued. "But I didn't die, because someone pulled me from the wreckage. Someone risked their own life to save mine. And for 15 years I never knew who it was." He turned and looked directly at Maria. "Until now." Maria's eyes widened. She shook her head slightly, as if pleading with him to stop. But Henry took a step toward her. "The woman who saved my life that night was Maria Reyes. She was a nurse at the hospital. She pulled me from the burning car. She stayed with me through the worst night of my life. And when she came to work in this house years later, she never once asked for recognition. She never once reminded me of what she had done." Gasps rippled through the room. Evelyn's face had gone white. Lucas stared, mouth open. Henry's voice broke. "I have allowed this woman to be treated as invisible, as less than. And I am ashamed." He crossed the room and, to everyone's shock, knelt before Maria. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I'm sorry for letting you endure disrespect. I'm sorry for forgetting. I'm sorry for not honoring the debt I owe you. Maria's tears fell freely now. You owe me nothing, Mr. Dalton. I owe you everything. He stood slowly and turned to Lila. You asked for 3 wishes. The first I have granted. The second I have just fulfilled. What is your third? Lila stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the room like a bell. My third wish is that you forgive yourself. Henry froze. The words struck him deeper than anything else could have. He had carried guilt for 15 years. Guilt for surviving. Guilt for moving on. Guilt for forgetting. And this child, this brave, impossibly wise child, was offering him release. Henry's composure shattered. He covered his face with his hands and wept. Great heaving sobs that echoed through the hall. Maria stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Lila moved to his other side and took his hand. And then slowly, Evelyn rose from her seat. She crossed the room, her heels clicking softly against the marble. She stopped in front of Maria and looked at her for a long moment. Then with tears in her eyes, she reached out and took Maria's hand. I'm sorry, Evelyn whispered. I didn't know. I didn't understand. Maria nodded, squeezing her hand gently. Evelyn turned to Lila. And you? You are braver than I ever was. Lucas stepped forward, next his face red, his voice choked. He looked at Lila and said the words he should have said weeks ago. Thank you. For saving me. For being braver than I could ever be. Lila smiled through her tears. You would have done the same. Lucas shook his head. No, I don't think I would have. But I want to try. Henry, still trembling, pulled Maria and Lila into an embrace. Evelyn joined them. Then Lucas. And slowly, one by one, the staff members stepped forward, no longer separated by walls of class and silence. The chandelier above them cast warm light across the room. And in that moment, the divisions that had existed for so long, the invisible lines between master and servant, between gratitude and pride, dissolved. They were just people. Flawed. Broken. And finally, honestly together. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was clearing. And somewhere in the distance, the first star of the evening appeared bright and unwavering against the darkening blue. 1 month later, the Dalton mansion felt like a different place. The air was warmer, the silence less oppressive. People smiled more. Maria no longer worked as a housekeeper. Henry had promoted her to household manager, overseeing the staff quarters and ensuring that everyone was treated with dignity. She accepted the position with quiet grace, though she still rose early and still made tea for the family each morning. Some habits, she said, were born of love, not obligation. Henry established a scholarship fund in Catherine's name. The Catherine Dalton Memorial Scholarship for students from working families, and the first recipient chosen unanimously by the board was Lila. When they told her, she cried. Not from relief, but from the realization that her mother's years of sacrifice had finally been seen. Evelyn changed too, though it happened slowly. She began learning the names of the staff. She thanked the cook after meals. She asked the gardener about his daughter's wedding. Small gestures, but they carried weight. One afternoon, she found Maria folding linens and sat beside her. I was jealous of you, Evelyn admitted quietly. Not because of Henry, but because you had something I didn't. A daughter who would fight for you. A love that didn't need wealth to survive. Maria smiled gently. You have that now too, if you let yourself see it. Evelyn nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm trying. Lucas and Lila became inseparable. They studied together, laughed together, and launched a charity project through their school to support children of service workers. Lucas told his friends with pride that Lila had saved his life twice. Once from a fire, once from himself. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, Lila found Lucas sitting on the terrace. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Using your wishes the way you did? Lila shook her head. No. I got everything I wanted. My mom is safe. Your family is whole. And your dad, he's free. Lucas smiled. You're wiser than any of us. I just knew what mattered. Henry himself seemed lighter. He laughed more. He spent less time in his office and more time with his family. He walked the grounds with Maria, sometimes talking about Catherine, about forgiveness, about second chances. One night, sitting alone in his study, he opened a leather journal and wrote, "A child asked me for 3 wishes. I thought I was granting her requests. But the truth is, she was granting mine. The first wish freed me from guilt. The second freed me from silence. The third freed me from the prison I'd built around my own heart. 3 wishes. But they were 3 acts of mercy, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of them." He closed the journal and looked out the window. In the garden below, Lila and Lucas were chasing fireflies, their laughter rising into the warm evening air. Maria stood nearby, watching them with a soft smile. Evelyn appeared and slipped her arm through Maria's, and together they watched the children play. Henry's throat tightened, not with sadness, but with something he hadn't felt in years: gratitude. He rose from his desk, left the study, and walked out into the garden. He joined his family. Not as a CEO, not as a man defined by wealth or power, just as a man, grateful, humbled, and finally at peace. The fireflies danced around them, glowing softly in the twilight like little stars that had fallen to earth just to remind them that even in the darkest nights, light always finds a way. Not every wish is made to get something you want. Some wishes are made to remind someone else how to be human again. Lila didn't ask for wealth. She didn't ask for status. She didn't even ask for herself. She asked for mercy, for truth, for forgiveness. And in doing so, she gave a broken man back his soul. 3 years later, Lila stood at the gates of the Dalton estate, a suitcase in one hand, a college acceptance letter in the other. The scholarship had opened doors she'd never dreamed possible. She was leaving for university, leaving to build a life her mother had worked so hard to give her. Henry stood on the front steps, hands in his pockets, watching her. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. But as she turned to go, he called out softly, "Lila." She looked back. He smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes. "Thank you. For everything." She nodded. "Take care of them, Mr. Dalton." "I will. I promise." She walked through the gates into the world beyond, carrying with her the knowledge that kindness is never wasted. That courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet voice saying, "Please, don't give up on us." Because true wealth isn't measured in what you own. It's measured in what you give, in who you protect, in the people you choose to see. And sometimes the richest person in the room is the one with nothing but a brave heart and 3 impossible wishes. Thank you for listening. Where are you right now, and what time is it there? Leave a comment and subscribe to Maid's Daughter Stories, where small acts of courage light up the world.